I thought he was taking the class, but he didn't sing. He's back there writing and writing. So I finish my little song that I sing. I sit down and he says to me, this is what got me right off the bat. He said to me, say, baby, where are you from? Say, baby, you know, he's speaking a different language. I knew it wasn't like that, you dig?
Yeah.
Say, baby, where you from? I said, I live right here in Fairbanks. He said, I didn't ask you that. I didn't ask you where you live. I asked you where you're from. I said, Connecticut. He said, I thought so. And he introduced himself. My name is Grover Sales.
You've had multiple conversations with people who, by normal pop standards, would be inaccessible. You know, you tell me lots of stories of people who you approach, and the question is, do you feel that what's different? That's my question. Is what is different between the stars or whatever now and those people of that era? Is there a difference, or am I just...
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, they were stars.
Right.
In their...
genre.
Yeah. But they, I mean, if they didn't dig you, if you didn't come onto them right, they would diss you in a minute. But they were open. They were friendly. It was them. They were open. They were approachable. To me, it seemed they were very approachable. I mean, I would approach them very respectfully. I wouldn't walk up to, hey, man, how you doing? No.
Right.
Mr. Mitchell, my name is Giacomo Gates. Pleasure to meet you. You know, I've enjoyed your work with the Count Basie Band. I let them know that I know where they're coming from, at least, you know. But they were approachable, and they were... I guess if you didn't come onto them right, like Johnny Griffin told me a story one time. He said, when it was in the middle of it, in maybe the 40s, the early 50s in New York, and they would be playing on the bandstand, and somebody would come by to sit in. If they didn't know who it was, they'd say, "Hey, man, can I sit in?" He said, "We'd never say yes or no. We'd say, yeah, if you can keep up." So it's funny, but it's not. It's real. Yeah, you can play if you can keep up.
Well, what I mean, Gates, is when I was younger and coming up as an audio engineer and producer, if I would see people who were in my industry, there was almost like people were so concerned about possibly losing their position that you wouldn't get a lot of support from the people that you really looked up to. You'd see them at trade shows. Everyone would keep a distance, sometimes a little condescending. Mm-hmm. You know, you seem to have broken through that to have, like, if I had the ability to speak to, for instance, any one of the great, I won't mention any names, any one of the great record producers of the era, it would have been, it would have been impossible.
I understand. That's funny. I never thought of it this way. I worked construction, and there were a lot of guys who wouldn't tell you how to do it because they were afraid that you might take their job.
Exactly.
On the other hand, once in a while you run across somebody who has got a lot of knowledge, and if you come to them in the way of like, listen, I've been watching you, and I've been trying to keep up. And I'm working my head off over here, and you just seem to be just kind of like casually rolling back and forth. But at the end of 6 hours, the pile of material that you put up is 3 times the size of mine. How'd you do that? They might tell you. They might. And I ran across a couple of guys who really opened my eyes up and gave me the quick crash course in how to move the most material with a bulldozer or a different kind of equipment, whatever it might be. But I think musically, part of the thing that I dug those guys about, like the Dizzies and the Monks and the Dexters, from what I used to read and hear, was it was a camaraderie. They were all helping each other,
But it still was a club that you had to have membership.
Oh no, I wasn't a member. But I guess, I tried to
You are
absorb.
now.
Pardon me?
You absolutely are now.
Well, that's nice. I mean, I feel accepted by a lot of musicians who are gone now, but who made me feel like I had some kind of validity. But it wasn't just like, I mean, there was always a test. There's always a test.
Well, okay,
You got to pass the test.
right. Okay, so I'm 23 years old. I just graduated from Westcon University. I'm a saxophonist. Okay, I'm an alto player. All right, and what's your advice?
First, I don't want to sound like Duke Ellington, but I'm going to say it, or probably half of them. Listen. Listen to what the people who you look up to, listen to what they play, listen to what they say, listen to what they do, look at the way they act. But, I got to tell you that I was attracted to a whole different era. I mean, if I wouldn't tell you as a 23-year-old getting out of, where'd you come from, Westcon?
Yeah.
No,
I didn't go there.
No, I know. But I mean, I wouldn't tell you to go and, go down to such and such a place and watch so-and-so. Because I don't know who to tell you to watch, because this is just me. If I go see a group playing, I don't want to see a bunch of people, men and or women. Doesn't matter what gender, okay? I don't want to see them show up looking like they have been either playing soccer, working on the furnace, hanging out watching television, or with their scuffies on. The cats that I used to be enamored with were like the Art Blakeys, who used to say, they see you first. Okay? So when you walk in the club, people should say, oh, that must be one of the musicians.
Oh, you mean like when you were in Italy? And you
that I was walking into a restaurant. That guy kind of got my vibe.
And so we're going to share that.
You want me to tell it?
Yeah, I want you to tell that because this is so you.
Well, I am from Italian extraction.
And never guess.
And the first time I went to Italy musically, because I had been there once before as a turista, but the first time I went to Italy musically was to do the Ancona Jazz Festival and a few other dates. And I was going to meet a gentleman, and I hope I have his name correctly because I could have reversed it. It was more than 20 years ago. It was either Roberto Umberto or Umberto Roberto. And I'm being serious, man.
Rosanna Dana.
He was like a heavyweight Italian booker. And I was supposed to meet him the day after I got to Ancona for lunch at this restaurant. So I walk in there, and I'm looking for a couple of guys. I don't know what he looks like, but I'm told to meet there at 1 o'clock or something like that. And I walk in, and I'm looking around, and I go sit, and I see a couple, 3 guys over there, and I walk over to them. I said, excuse me. I said, my name is Giacomo Gates. And Umberto turned to his 2 friends in a beautiful Italian accent, said, see, I knew it was him. He walks like a swinging motherfucker.
So you got that checkbox.
Happy.
Yeah, that's funny. That's great.
It's funny.
But now we're gonna take that concept and I want to discuss how that pendulum has swung way too far. Now,
it's a different time. It's a different whatever. I mean, I don't know.
What's a different? Because all right, now we're going to get into the crux of it now about where is jazz, what is jazz, and et cetera. Is jazz dead? And one of the things I want to start with, because I've learned this throughout my entire career, is the defining line between being an entertainer or an artist.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Look at these cups. They're nice cups.
Oh, well, actually, really? They were given to me. It was a deal I made, and I got those in return.
A deal?
Yeah, with an ex-girlfriend that I had a long time ago. Well, the deal was that she could basically sleep with anybody she wanted, and I get the cups and saucers.
Oh, solid.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, at the end of it, I got the cups and saucers still.
That's right.
I don't know
Still.
what's on the other end. I don't know how what she got worked out, but I can just tell you I like these. But thank you.
A little China.
Yeah, exactly. I get the China. You get the. I don't know. We know where that could go. Move a few vowels around and we're good.
Yeah, I'll leave it alone.
Okay. Anyway, but the issue between the idea of being an entertainer or being an artist, and here's the way I define the two. The artist does what they feel, their soul feels. Their art reflects who they are and what their message is, and who receives that is irrelevant. Who receives it, because it's more or less they have an obligation to express this, right? So consequently, if an artist, and many of them do, live in poverty or live in very isolated situations, that may have its own frustrations and other things, but it doesn't restrict their art. Their art is not based on I have to eat this week, so I have to compromise. The entertainer, on the other hand, is 100% geared at mass acceptance. So their goal is to entertain as many people as possible, and that's how they define success. In any entertainment world, I mean, it's with all these award shows and everything, it's like, oh, the people's choice. All right, well, let's define the people. All right. So, it has its place because entertainment is very, very important to people who need that in their life. They need some type of distraction from the realities of, let's face it. I mean, if you wake up on the other side of the dirt every morning, you're doing well.
Yeah.
People
go out to have a good time.
Yeah, they go out to have a good time because they need to have a good time. You need those endorphins. You have to be entertained. You have to laugh, but the thing I think one of the things that we tend to want to ignore, and it's a third rail issue, is evolutionary issues. People who evolve in certain things, and in jazz, let's face it, it's a highly evolved taste. It's a highly evolved source of music, just as some of the grand masters of classical were. Pop music tends to be geared towards people who intellectual stimulation from the music is not the priority. It's almost like it's a background music. It's the difference between going to a concert and watching, something that has a backdrop to it. Maybe a fashion show and there's music going on. It's not the music isn't the focus. It's just to create a mood. So what we have now, though, with the younger generation, and not even younger in the sense of very young, I mean, going back 25, 30 years, is everything is measured by the approval of the masses. So consequently, your advice, like you got to look the part, that's true. You can't walk into a jazz club wearing sweats and a pair of, Reeboks and pick up a horn and play, and anybody take you seriously.
Now.
You can now.
Oh, yeah,
well, no,
you kept going. You should take it seriously. I mean, some people will, some people won't.
But not the people that you want to impress. Oh God, that's even the worst word. Not the people that you want to be respected by. I think jazz artists created their own audience, and that was usually other artists, whether they could play or not. Jazz enthusiasts. These were people who would set up a hi-fi system in their home, and they would sit there with a 30-year-old, cognac or bourbon, and play the records and just sit there and listen and take it all in. That doesn't happen anymore, especially when you got the ear pods and everything like that. And I don't know anybody who's a true jazz enthusiast who listens to it on ear pods, which I'll talk about a little later.
Yeah, the air.
Well, there's more than to the air. There's a whole reality that's going on now where we're not even in the sensory area of where music was intended. For instance, you talked about Thelonious Monk and his tonality. okay, and how he would create tonal combinations that would inspire a certain emotion. Now, those tonal combinations have to be communicated. And if that, your ears are only a small portion of what you receive when you're listening to music. For the sake of data and for the sake of, mass consumption, we've limited now what the end user receives for convenience. So, I'm going a little bit off here, so just follow me. So we go back to the day when they came out with what's called MP3s, okay? And this is where I'm coming in as the audio engineer. All right?
Right. You know about all this. Go ahead.
So you have these MP3s, which is created, the algorithms were written back in the 1980s, okay, 40 years ago, all right? So the idea of, well, we can take this sound that's recorded sonically. So we take this piano, we record something, and it has a certain image. Let's say in a photographic, it has the full color wheel. Think of sound, it has your lows, your highs, it has your harmonics, and all these beautiful things that you can't hear, but you sense. So if your ears, on a scale of audio experience, here's what the human body is capable of receiving. This is what the ears take on. So what happened to this and what happened to that? Okay, it's gone. What an MP3 did was, in order to minimize the size of the file, they went in and arbitrarily removed certain parts of that spectrum. And who made that decision? Who made the decision what? Well, okay. And that way, when you store it, it's it's a much smaller file. Okay, so the reason for that was because Apple had come out with their little iPod, and you couldn't fit, because of the size of the data storage back then, you couldn't fit more than 1 or 2 songs of any type of fidelity. So they had to create a file structure so you can put 50 songs on your little iPad, because otherwise they never sell it, your little iPod. Okay, so now the file structure has been filtered significantly so that you can fit more things on a device. But what really hurts the most is that the artist is not projecting what they intended in their composition. So now you take it to the next step, where you're eliminating speakers and you're eliminating these devices which are intended to reproduce what the microphone captures. See, when we set up microphones, and I'll say this to anybody out there who's a musician, wants to be an audio engineer, to your point, the first thing is learn how to listen. Because when you set up a microphone, you're not capturing a sound. The goal isn't to see the meter do this. The goal is to capture the aura, the essence of the sound. I mic you up for vocals, okay? I don't put a mic in front of your mouth. I'll put a microphone at a certain distance where it's capturing your skull resonation, your chest, and what comes out of your mouth, your nasal cavities, and then I'll combine those so that when the person plays it back, they have Giacomo Gates in their house. Immediately call the police. Okay, and stop me if I'm going off on any kind of area where I take it too far. So
this is informative.
Okay, so let's just tie this to current music genre. So you have people who are doing jazz compositions and they're doing jazz performances and they're using artificial instruments. I've always been a huge proponent against electronic pianos. They don't sound good. Mr. Kurzweil, sorry, anyone. They don't have the impact that a real acoustic instrument does, because everything has been filtered. So what I'm tying this all to is the fact that the younger generation has never really, not say never, that's not the right thing to say, rarely experiences the impact of the acoustics and the design of the initial composition. I've played large concerts. I've played 10,000 seaters, big, massive PAs in pop bands. I also played with big bands. And I've never got my ass kicked more than when a horn section came in on a hit with a drummer, with an upright bass player, when I won't mention his name, but a pretty popular Vegas type singer. I mean, after being on stage with large guitar amps and huge, backline systems and everything, I got my ass kicked the most when I was in front of a live big band and they hit. And it was because I was getting sonically what was acoustically generated by other human beings. So we've got a big gap right now within the jazz community and within the pop community where what they're hearing and what they're playing, it's like they never experienced it. So the hunger's not there. And also, so the critique isn't there. So they can't go to a club and say, that horn player's got a great sound, because he's coming through 9 out of 10 times through a sound system which is completely altering it. And I listen to the records that are recorded, and I listen to all of the sonics in them. And it's mind-boggling how you can do a record. I've done, records with you. Mm-hmm. I've heard them played in places, and I can't even recognize as what's coming out. It's so bad because it's all been filtered.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, requires more reflection on the part of the listener than it does compromise on the part of the artist.
Yeah, because some artists are going to do what they do no matter what. So it's up to the listener to either pick up on it or not.
But if they're sincere to the genre, you can't hold that against them.